I was at the protest. There were millions of people. What you are trying to do, just like you did during the Israeli regime's attack on Iran, is you are trying to help war. Because when the Israeli regime carried out that blitzkrieg attack, as we were negotiating with them, you invited me and started bad-mouthing Iran. Why? Because you and many others like you.
No, I didn't bad-mouth Iran. Sorry, just to be clear.
Oh, yes, you did.
Just to be clear. Hang on. Professor.
In today's video, Professor Marandi destroys Piers Morgan with facts on Piers Morgan Uncensored. We've seen it before in places like Iraq and Libya. What was supposed to help often led to more chaos, more instability, and years of unintended consequences. And in many cases, outside pressure actually strengthens the very regimes people are trying to challenge. That's why Professor Marandi's angle stands out here. It's not about defending a government. It's about recognizing that real change usually has to come from within, not from the outside forcing it. But before we dive into today's video, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.
Welcome back to Uncensored, Mohammed Marandi. I appreciate you coming on. What is your assessment of what is happening on the ground in Iran?
Well, first of all, when you say a supporter of the regime, you're framing it in a certain way. I assume you are a supporter of the British or the American regime. But it's obvious what happened. We had currency manipulation last week. The currency fell 30-40%. It was carried out by the United States, forcing neighboring countries not to cooperate with the Iranians over the currency. Then we had peaceful protests among business people. And there were a few thousand people in 2-3 different cities. There was no violence. There were no arrests. Nothing happened. Then the next day, we had more protests, roughly the same size, I guess. I don't remember exactly. Then we had infiltration, and we had violent rioters. And that was the beginning of extreme violence, which peaked on Thursday night. And we know that Pompeo, the former head of the CIA, said that Mossad is on the ground with the rioters. We have Mossad in a Persian statement. They said that they are on the ground. And the most interesting thing of all is that late on Thursday night, during the height of the riots, and roughly 100 officers of the law were murdered. A couple of them burnt alive, beheaded, head smashed. We had a nurse who was burned alive in a clinic. The clinic was burnt down. We had many buses, ambulances, and fire engines destroyed, tens of each. I'm not sure about ambulances, but I know tens of fire engines and public buses and private property. But the point is that late on Thursday night or early in the morning, they cut off the internet and suddenly everything died down. The reason? Because all these groups, these small groups, violent groups that were spread out in different cities and different parts of big cities, they could no longer communicate with their bosses abroad. So if it was really spontaneous, the riots would have continued. But now we've had 4 days of quiet. And yesterday, we had massive anti-riot protests across the country. And I asked your producer to show footage of the protests in Tehran against the rioters. And this is from the middle of the footage. This is Engelab Square. It goes from Imam Hussein Square to Azadi Square, from Engelab Square south to Imam Khomeini Square. That is millions of people. That is huge. Anyone can look on the map or use DeepSeek or some other AI app and check what sort of distance this is. This is a helicopter. But just a few hours ago...
Just to stop you there, Professor O'May, just to be clear, that's footage you've supplied. We've been unable to independently verify it, so it is what it is.
What makes this debate tricky is that people often act like there are only two options. Either you defend the Iranian government or you treat every unrest story coming out of Iran like it's automatically a pure democratic uprising with no outside interference. Real life is usually messier than that, and that's where Professor Marandi's broader point has some truth to it, even if I wouldn't go as far as he does. Foreign meddling in Iran is not some wild conspiracy theory. The US and Britain literally helped overthrow Iran's elected prime minister in 1953. That coup is one of the biggest reasons distrust of the West runs so deep in Iran to this day. On top of that, Iran has been hit with years of covert pressure, from the Stuxnet cyber attack to the assassinations of nuclear scientists. So when Iranian officials or commentators say outside powers try to destabilize the country, there is actual historical context for that. There's also the sanctions issue, which people in the West love to talk about in abstract terms. But sanctions don't just hit the regime, they crush ordinary people too. Iranian inflation has been brutal for years. The currency has taken repeated hits. Medicine shortages have been widely reported, and middle-class families get squeezed first. That doesn't excuse repression by the state. Not at all, but it does mean economic chaos in Iran is not happening in a vacuum. External pressure has absolutely played a role. Another thing people miss is that protests in countries like Iran can be both genuine and manipulated at the same time.
Clearly, there are people, it seems from all the independent reports I've read, who are... Okay, so Goldie, for example, one of our panelists is saying that footage is from 2020. So we don't know what you're showing us there. You accept that?
No, that's a dishonest take. That footage is very clear. This misinformation is being produced by the West, and the reporter who was on that helicopter, whose face is there, he came on television, showed the footage. I was at the protest. There were millions of people. What you are trying to do, just like you did during the Israeli regime's attack on Iran, is you are trying to help war. Because when the Israeli regime carried out that blitzkrieg attack, as we were negotiating with them, you invited me and started bad-mouthing Iran. Why? Because you and many others like you...
No, I didn't bad-mouth Iran. Sorry, just to be clear.
Oh, yes, you did.
Just to be clear. Hang on. Professor, just to be clear, I never bad-mouthed Iran. I bad-mouthed the Iranian regime, which I think is one of the most malevolent regimes in the world. That's not bad-mouthing the country of Iran or the Iranian people. Now, I want to bring in Goldie Gamari because she wants to directly challenge.
She wants
to directly challenge what you have said.
One-on-one.
Yes,
you said
that's
it's
fine.
a one-on-one.
That's fine.
Your producer.
But you've accused her.
You did not allow me to continue.
Fine, but you have.
Your producer said.
Yes.
It's a one-on-one between you and me.
Yes.
You're escaping the debate.
Hang on, Goldie. Hang on, Goldie. Hang on, please. Don't all talk at once. Professor Marandi. Professor Marandi.
You and me.
Professor Marandi, let me, Goldie, please let me handle this. Professor Marandi, here's why I brought Goldie back into the conversation with you.
No, so you're being dishonest.
Because she says to us, have you watched that footage? It is actually not what you have said it is. Goldie, tell the professor what you believe that footage is.
What makes this exchange complicated is that Piers is right about one thing and wrong about another. He's right that criticizing the Iranian government is not the same as attacking the Iranian people. But where Professor Marandi has a point is that Western media and Western governments often blur concern into a narrative that starts sounding a lot like regime change prep. And Iran has very real historical reasons to be suspicious of that. The 1953 coup against Mohammad Mossadegh wasn't propaganda. It was a US and UK-backed overthrow that shaped Iranian politics for generations. Iran has also been hit with years of covert pressure, including the Stuxnet cyber attack on its nuclear infrastructure and repeated sanctions campaigns designed to choke its economy. So when Iranian voices say outside powers don't exactly come to these stories with clean hands, that's not paranoia, that's history. And there's another uncomfortable truth here. Sanctions and external pressure do not just hurt the regime, they hit ordinary people first. Even UN reporting has warned about the humanitarian consequences of broad coercive measures, and the current war has already disrupted aid flows and essential goods. Reuters also reported this week that fertilizer shipments through the Strait of Hormuz are a major concern because the conflict is disrupting supply chains in ways that could hit food security far beyond Iran. So no, I'm not buying the simple version where the West just wants to help the Iranian people and everything else is collateral damage. Now, where I would part ways with Marandi is on the more extreme framing that outside meddling explains basically everything. It doesn't. Iran's government has its own record of crackdowns, censorship, and repression, and that part is real too. But two things can be true at once. Many Iranians have genuine grievances, and foreign powers absolutely try to exploit unrest when it suits them.
That footage is from Qasem Soleimani's funeral in 2020. That is not footage from today. That is 100% propaganda. The Islamic regime, they are liars. They are murderers. They are thieves. I don't even know how he has access to the internet right now. The internet is shut off. The internet is shut off. Where is he communicating from?
Okay, now, Piers, I just want to remind you that your producer said this is a one-on-one.
Yeah.
And like on previous occasions, you do not abide by what you say you'll do.
Well, you made a statement. You made a statement and gave us footage, which one of our panelists has directly challenged.
But just to respond, in the General Qasem Soleimani's funeral, the bodies were on trucks, and there are no trucks in this crowd. And the crowd goes from Imam Hussein Square, which is to the top, towards the top. The crowd here goes all the way to Imam Hussein Square. The bodies never went there. The bodies the funeral procession began at the University of Tehran. So the path of the General Soleimani funeral and his companions was not towards Imam Hussein. And here, where are the trucks? Where's the funeral procession? Because it was not just him. There were a number of people who were murdered. Don't pretend. No one can pretend that the rallies yesterday, which took place across Iran, in Mashhad, in Tabriz, in Marandi, in Esfahan.
The footage rally, all been debunked.
This Piers, if you next, I won't come again on your show because every time you're dishonest.
You will be able to come again on the show because when Iran is free, we're going to get it.
No, to be fair, let me explain.
People on your hands right now.
Goldie, I will come back to Goldie and the panel in a moment. I'll go back to one-on-one. I will go back to one, Professor. I will go back to one-on-one with you now. She wanted to directly challenge that footage. She's done so, and you have responded. That is perfectly legitimate journalism from where I'm sitting.
No, that's not acceptable, Piers. In any case, just hours ago, the BBC was showing the footage of the protests across Iran against the rioters yesterday and talking about an uprising, implying dishonestly that these people on the streets who are protesting against the rioters are in fact supporters of the rioters. This is how it works in the West.
I don't agree with some of Professor Marandi's more extreme takes, especially when it starts sounding like every protest or criticism is purely foreign-driven. That kind of thinking ignores the very real frustrations a lot of Iranians have. But at the same time, he's not wrong about one big thing. The way these situations get portrayed in Western media isn't always as clear-cut or honest as people think, because misinformation and mislabeling footage during conflicts or protests happens a lot. We've seen this in multiple global events. Videos from different years or locations get recycled, clips get taken out of context, and narratives form before full verification is even done. Even major outlets have had to issue corrections in past conflicts because early reporting turned out to be incomplete or misleading. So when there's pushback about whether footage is accurate or not, that skepticism isn't crazy. It's actually necessary. There's also a bigger pattern here. Coverage of countries like Iran often leans heavily in one direction, especially when those countries are geopolitical rivals of the West. That doesn't mean everything reported is false, but it does mean stories can get framed in a way that fits a certain narrative. For example, during past protests in Iran, some demonstrations were highlighted heavily, while others, like pro-government rallies, got far less attention, even when both were happening at the same time. That creates a very one-sided picture for viewers. And then there's the information environment inside Iran itself. When internet restrictions happen, it doesn't just block one side, it creates a vacuum where both misinformation and selective reporting can thrive.